impactful choice
Hey, that nigga Troy slept her. Oh
to
my
his
god.
wife or assist Kenny are meaningless.
That nigga Troy. That's so disrespectful. That is a 11-year-old girl. You gonna sleep like that? Now, me personally, I helped Kenny and I got stuck like that. That nigga Troy did not care who it was. Clementine got slept. Assume that they're going to get to that when we get to that. So yeah, let's go.
Nothing I say before I have to lose.
Misunderstood story of consequences.
The Walking Dead Season 1 is undeniably one of the greatest games ever made. It told a story about protecting innocence, walking the fine line between becoming a monster and being a worthy protector. The consequences of your actions rarely affected you directly. Instead, they shaped Clementine, the young girl you swore to protect.
This is why season 1 is so good. The way that they made Lee such a great protector was so good, because they could have made it so where, oh, those consequences didn't really shape Clementine, they're just there. But no, everything you did, Clementine remembers. In season 2, she brings it up a lot, and even when you do season 2, they ask you, did you make this decision? Make a decision? Because Clementine uses those ideologies in 2. The way they used season 1 was so good, because even at the end with Kenny, we have a decision between Kenny helping you and I. Everybody goes back to what they said, to what you have system, to what you did to them, and they like, I don't want to help you. I help you because you've been there for me. Everything season 1 did was perfect.
Nurture and keep happy. Season 2, however, flips the script. Lee is gone, and now you become Clementine. The opening is strikingly simple. Clementine is warned by Omid to keep track of her things. She doesn't. Omid is killed. Soon after, Krista is ambushed by bandits, and despite your choices, she likely doesn't survive. Later, Clementine is forced to make a decision about feeding a stray dog or keeping the food for herself. Yet the outcome is always the same. She's attacked regardless.
See, the beginning of season 2 is perfect. I like how they do that. They allow you to see that Clementine needs to listen. She doesn't have a lead there to help her out all the time. Because with Omid said, yo, you gotta protect your things. And Clementine literally left her stuff on the sink and went to a stall by herself. That was stupid. And also when she was in the stall, if she was to leave her things, she didn't get the main thing that would have protected her out, a gun. She left the gun on the sink. Like,
when the season 2 group finds her with a dog bite, nothing you say changes their reaction. They lock her in a shed. This introduction is intentionally one track, driving home a crucial point. You're not Lee anymore. You're a vulnerable, fragile young girl. Choices of action or violence will rarely go in your favor. Instead, season 2 shifts focus to emotional decisions. While the adults around you fight and destroy each other, you're left picking up the pieces, largely through words and small gestures. Where season 1 was about creating a future for Clementine, season 2 is about adults deciding what to do with her. Furthermore, season 2 is about which adults you actually agree with morally. The only real choice you're given is deciding who seems like the most worthy, honest, or reasonable person to make decisions for you. In essence, season 2 is about finding Clementine's next Lee and deciding what worldview you want Clementine to have. The theme of finding your next Lee is exemplified during the river scene with Pete and Nick. Pete, one of the only adults kind to Clementine, takes her and Nick on a fishing trip. However, walkers attack, forcing Clementine to choose between the two. On one side is Nick, a hot-headed and unreliable screw-up who argued for Clementine's death because of her bite, though he later apologized apologizes, citing grief over his mother. On the other side is Pete, a calm, fatherly figure who has only shown kindness, offering to teach Clementine essential survival skills. The choice feels obvious. Pete is clearly the safer and more trustworthy option, yet the game undermines this decision. Pete is bitten and doomed to die. This moment is telling. Clementine isn't a capable adult like Lee. She isn't armed. She doesn't rescue anyone. And her choice is ultimately meaningless. All she does is run to the side she picks and stands there helplessly. It's a stark reminder that Clementine is powerless in many ways. Her decisions aren't about taking control, but about aligning herself with people who might stay alive long enough to help her. This lack of control defines the consequences of Season 2. If you choose not to make friends with Sarah, refuse to forgive Nick, or stir up drama with Rebecca, by episode 2, almost everyone dislikes Clementine. The only exception is Luke, who is purposefully designed to be kind and dependable. A soft-hearted optimist.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I played, I was cool with everybody. Nick was the only person I was like, okay, you're tripping. But everybody else, I mean, I made up with. I mean, that's the point of the game. I'm in a new group. Why would I try to stir up drama? That's just stupid. I feel like your main purpose was to try to get over with the group, because I mean, you're a little girl. You don't have any. They do not have to accept you at all. They don't have to. So you have to get over with them and tell them like what you're doing.
Who serves as a safety net, but leaning on Luke alone is dangerous, a lesson we learned from the Nick and Pete situation. Banking on one person is never enough. To survive, Clementine must navigate the messy, volatile dynamics of the new group, forgiving and making allies even when it's difficult. The game doesn't hide its message. You don't get to choose who surrounds you. Your survival hinges on socializing and adapting, not on physical strength or decisive actions. In episode 2, the season's main villain, Carver, makes a surprise appearance. The dynamics I mentioned earlier,
Which is why I like this season. That's one thing I like about this season, is that they make you feel like you are vulnerable, like you can't do anything. Which is why that's what this is supposed to be, because you are a 12-year-old girl. You're supposed to be like you're not supposed to have that much power. You're not supposed to be elite, because you are a 12-year-old girl who knows how to use a gun, but barely doesn't really know how to kill zombies like that until Jane teaches you how to. Like, you're vulnerable. You are a small little girl. So I like how they use that dynamic, that you have to be emotional. You have to appeal to everybody to make sure everybody loves you. Because when I played, everybody after the first episode was pretty much, it was like, okay, we messed with Clementine. Besides Nick, of course, and then Rebecca got over her little jealousy thing. So I was pretty cool with everybody, I'm gonna lie.
are in full effect. You can't lock the door or ask him to leave. Carver will walk straight in.
That makes sense. You're a little girl.
Hello there.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay. How are you?
Well, I'm doing just fine. Thank you. My family.
Regardless of whether you're truthful or spin convincing lies, Carver will always see through you. Even minor decisions, like refusing to let Sarah take a photo, don't matter. She'll do it anyway, and Carver will inevitably find it. Your control over this encounter is non-existent. Personally though, I found this moment compelling. One-on-one time with the main villain, especially during their introduction, is a rarity in most games. Carver's arrival forces the Season 2 group to flee toward the mountains. Even on the journey there, you get power and choice ripped from you again when Nick impulsively shoots a well-meaning stranger. All of this builds up to what I consider the best, and for others the most divisive, moment in the game: the return of Kenny.
Kenny!
That was so good.
Wait, you know this guy? Clementine?
That's so fire. I love how there's a lot of things I love about this season. There is. Obviously I have some issues, but boom, the way that they was able to add Kenny back, to add somebody that you know and that allows Clementine to relate to somebody was so good. I love Kenny, bro. Love Kenny.
Upon catching up with him, you learn dinner's ready, and here's the part a lot of people miss. This right here, the choice to sit with Kenny or the season 2 group, is actually where the introduction to season 2 ends. This is the ultimate social decision. Who do you want to stick around? Who do you trust? Who do you want to learn more about? The game just spent 1.5 episodes driving home the fact that the only choice you truly have is picking who sticks around. Everything else, well, Clementine has no control. This, I believe, is actually the moment the Jane versus Kenny versus Alone choice gets foreshadowed. The entire game isn't built on protecting Clementine, it's built on choosing who does or is worthy to. By this point in the game, it's clear that 95% of players are funneled into liking either Luke or Kenny. That's the core dynamic, the new guy Luke versus the familiar face Kenny. It feels like a deliberate foreshadowing. However, it's also apparent that TellTale struggled with the script. Episode 1 and 2 are largely crafted to make you warm to Luke, and Kenny's sudden reappearance feels engineered to force a choice between them. Of course, with the final script, this choice shifts to Kenny and Jane, but I doubt this was the plan from the start, just a theory. The biggest decision in episode 2 revolves around, you guessed it, a social choice. You must decide whether to tell Walter the truth about Nick, because the stranger Nick shot was Walter's friend. If you tell the truth, you could potentially save Nick's life.
I told the truth.
By the time Carver arrives at the lodge, Clementine's choices could have already caused more deaths than Carver himself will, simply through the ripple effects of social interactions. You can't save Walter when Carver kills him, and even if you manage to save Elvin, Carver kills him anyway. So we're 2 episodes deep. What is season 2 about? If major choices feel inconsequential, but minor ones carry weight, what's the game's real focus? If season 1 was about action and protecting innocence, season 2 is about socialization. It's about understanding your role as an 11-year-old girl in a chaotic world, where words and relationships are your only weapons. This is the stage in Clementine's life where she must learn to socialize in ways that benefit her, even if the people she's doing that with are flawed and unreliable. You can't survive by only trusting those who treat you kindly. Some people must be won over, and those people might just be your only choice in a week or 2. Now that we've established season 2 is largely a game of social choices, where Clementine is always ignored or powerless, let's focus on the arrival of Carver, how it deepens my point.
Now, everything he's saying, I agree with. I agree that this season is different. This season, the reason why it is hated. Now, I'm not gonna say the reason why I semi-dislike it, hope he gets to it, because that's what I'm gonna say. But in terms of being social, I understand that, because the difference between Lee and Clementine is the fact that Lee is a grown man who, was in jail for murder, but got out because of the prison, maybe because of the zombies. So he was able to initiate action. He was able to do things, because even though he had to protect a little girl and instill things to her, he was still able to do things because he's a guy. But Clementine is an 11-year-old girl who is lonely, vulnerable, doesn't have any protector or anything. So you're forced to make friends. You're forced to do social things as an 11-year-old girl. And that makes sense. It makes sense how some of the options, it doesn't matter. Like for Sarah, taking the picture. She doesn't know you, and also that, like, you can't make her not take the picture. Same thing for Carver. Carver is a grown man. Why would he not walk in because an 11-year-old girl told him not to? That doesn't make sense. That wouldn't even make sense. And then also Nick killing that guy. Luke couldn't tell him to stop. You had an option as Clementine to tell him to stop. I did, but that didn't do anything because Clementine's a 11-year-old girl. Nick is, I'm pretty sure, a grown man or going to be a grown man, so he can do what he wants to do. Like everything makes sense on how it happens. It does.
And how ultimately choosing your next protector is affected by it. With Carver's arrival, the dynamic shifts drastically for Clementine. Carver is a deranged, psychopathic dictator who enslaves survivors in a hardware store, valuing control over human life. Pleasing him is almost impossible. He accepts no excuses. If choices felt inconsequential before, they feel utterly meaningless now. One
Bro, it literally didn't matter. It didn't matter what you did. That nigga did something. Like, bro, with that, I forgot his name, but with that nigga, bro, I literally did my own stuff. I helped Sarah out because she was getting in trouble, and he still got in trouble. Like, bro, it doesn't matter what you do, bro. Carver did not care.
One early decision involving Carver is whether to help Sarah with her work after she's hit by her father under Carver's orders. Both Clementine and Sarah are under Reggie's supervision, a kind-hearted man who hasn't done anything wrong. Regardless of whether you help Sarah or focus on your own work, the outcome remains the same. Carver deems the effort insufficient and kills Reggie.
No! 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 Please! Ah!
Trying to run over there. You can't do nothing.
Weakness, incompetence. It puts us all at risk, and it won't be tolerated.
Later, Clementine steals a walkie-talkie, prompting Kenny to take the blame. As punishment, Kenny gets brutally beaten.
Badly.
No!
God! Jesus Christ! Stop!
Stop him! Somebody stop him!
Troy, do
Let me
something!
go!
Clementine, help
You
me!
have to do this!
Your choices in this moment, whether to restrain Sarita, his wife, or assist Kenny, are meaningless. Carver will always carry out the beating. Even with Carver's oppressive presence, the most impactful choice
Hey, that nigga Troy slept her. Oh my
to his
God.
wife or assist Kenny are meaningless.
That nigga Troy. That's so disrespectful. That is a 11-year-old girl. You gonna sit like that? Now, me personally, I helped Kenny and I got stuck like that. That nigga Troy did not care who it was. Clementine got slept.
Carver will always carry out the beating. Even with Carver's oppressive presence, the most impactful choices remain social. Do you confide in Bonnie about Luke? Do you watch Kenny beat Carver? Even the climactic choice of
I watched Kenny beat Carver, and I can't stand how in the game Luke kept on bringing it back up. Like you watch Kenny beat Carver. Yes, bro. I wanted to watch that nigga beat that nigga. Pause.
Episode 3, whether to amputate Sarita's arm or kill the walker attacking her, is mostly pointless, as Sarita always dies. Episode 3 ultimately serves as a grim introduction to serious, unhinged villains. It forces protectors like Kenny, Luke, and Jane to prove themselves under pressure, as Clementine runs errands for whichever plan seems most viable. This episode isn't really about Clementine. Instead, it's about evaluating who among the group can lead effectively and stand up to the threats like Carver. Clementine for now remains powerless, overlooked and not taken seriously. This seems intentional in the earlier episodes, where the focus is on how the adults establish themselves as leaders before Clementine's input carries weight. The Season 2 group is often criticised for being bad, but that's mostly intentional. You have loose cannons, overprotective figures, and humanitarians. It's all about choosing who you think is wrong and right. By episode 4, however, this dynamic shifts. Clementine's growing personality earns her respect, and the group begins to see her as an essential part of their survival. While Kenny spirals into despair after Sarita's death, even blaming Clementine in his grief, Jane takes the opportunity for a one-on-one lesson. She teaches Clementine survival skills, how to search walkers, what to scavenge, and how to take them down efficiently. A hardened loner who distrusts groups, Jane quickly thrusts her worries onto Kenny, deeming him broken in the aftermath of his loss of Sarita and his brutal beatdown of Carver. This marks a turning point where TellTale shifts the narrative, positioning Jane as Kenny's opposition rather than the intended Luke. The choice to frame the story around Jane versus Kenny is understandable. Jane embodies pragmatic.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry, but I really didn't think like Jane and Kenny was the perfect versus duo to battle Clementine. because it makes sense. Jane was the more realistic option. She told you straight up, like, yo, like she even told Rebecca straight up. She was like, yo, Rebecca, like, you gonna keep that baby for real? Like, I don't think that baby's gonna work out. And it was a harsh truth, but that was real because it's hard to keep a baby in a apocalypse. She was being real. It was a harsh truth. So I do with Clementine. She told Clementine, like, yo, Clementine, like, I don't trust Kenny, man. I just don't do it. Jane is a more realistic option. Kenny is a more family oriented lover option. You mess with Kenny because you've been with him the whole season last season, and you understand what he went through, and you understand how he is, and he relates to Clementine more. But Jane is more of a realistic problem option. It was a perfect versus duo because Luke, I like Luke, but I never liked him over Kenny. I just didn't. But Jane and Kenny was a good dynamic. Now, I still pick Kenny today, but if people pick Jane, I would understand that, especially at the end.
Solo survival, advocating for cutting ties with anything or anyone that might drag you down. Kenny, by contrast, clings to a crumbling vision of family and loyalty, his mental state deteriorating under the weight of his losses. At first glance, Jane's philosophy may seem like the logical path forward, but with AJ's impending arrival, her worldview begins to get shaky. To Jane, AJ is nothing more than a burden, a liability that could endanger Clementine's survival. This mindset is evident when she pushes to abandon Sarah during the RV Walker attack, revealing her ruthless approach to cutting losses. When Rebecca dies at the end of episode 4 after giving birth to AJ, we're back to square one. The focus shifts to protecting innocence, but now we're doing it through the eyes of a little girl instead of Lee. This not only reinforces the theme of protecting innocence, but also revives the original concept of Clementine choosing her next protector. In my opinion, episode 4 reflects a critical moment when the writers recognized the need to refocus on the game's central theme, preparing Clementine to choose her next Lee. This pivotal choice, whether to embrace Kenny's familial devotion or Jane's cold survivalism, defines Clementine's future and solidifies the emotional stakes of the finale. Everything in the story builds towards the finale. The Sarita choice feels deliberately designed to push Kenny into looking unstable, giving Jane her chance to stand out. At times though, the unhinged Kenny angle feels overdone. I actually think AJ's birth was included to balance things. Kenny might be losing it, but Jane is completely unequipped to care for a baby. With all this in mind, let's focus on the
That's why I picked Kenny, because the thing about Jane is so quick to abandon everybody. She did it before. She did it multiple times. She's quick to abandon people. So when I have a little baby with me, I'm going to go with the father, like somebody who is loyal, who has had family in the past and didn't want to get rid of them but was forced to because of the way they died. The only way that I would have picked Jane was if I didn't have AJ, or if I didn't have AJ, then Jane would be a more realistic option. But Kenny just made the most sense when you have somebody like AJ.
The big choice of episode 5, Kenny or Jane. This may be the most controversial part of this video, but hear me out. I want to explore both Jane and Kenny, but also present some theories that I haven't seen discussed before. I believe the story of Season 2, especially the role of Kenny, is widely misunderstood. Allow me to explain what I think Kenny actually represents in this season, and what his character arc truly conveys. Many people claim Kenny goes crazy after losing his family, but I disagree. I believe his slow descent into instability is primarily driven by guilt, not by loss. This is because he blames himself for the deaths of his loved ones. In my first video on Season 1, I discussed how Kenny mirrors Lee, a man who can act ruthlessly in private, but tries to shield those he loves from the harsh realities of the world. Kenny's obsession with protecting innocence is both his strength and his downfall. His relentless need to shield his family contributes to Duck's death. and his refusal to let Katja face their grim reality ultimately leaves her broken, leading to her tragic end. By the time season 2 arrives, after Kenny loses Sarita in a manner reminiscent of Katja's death, the protective side of him snaps. He briefly blames Clementine, but if you watch closely, it's clear that Kenny staying behind to kill Carver led to Sarita being left vulnerable. He knows he failed her and even prays for her forgiveness, not Clementine's, but his own forgiveness. This moment highlights the shift in Kenny. He becomes increasingly desperate to protect Clementine and AJ, but this time right in front of them. The Kenny we see in season 2 is a version of Lee who, if given the chance, might have killed the St. John's without hesitation. A Lee who would kill the stranger in front of Clementine. Some argue that Kenny is abusive, but I strongly disagree. His actions aren't motivated by malice or control, but by fear, guilt, and an overwhelming desire to protect those he has.
Yeah, I never thought Kenny was. I never thought he was abusive. I never thought he was the Kenny like crash out is funny because Kenny's a crash out, but he's a crash out over his family. The way that he views Clementine is why I picked him. He views Clementine as his family. Him and AJ off the rip. When he sees AJ off the rip, he views him as his family. Off the rip, when he sees Clementine again, he sees her as family. So Kenny does extra. Like he does a lot. He does a lot. I'm not gonna lie. And that's what gives people that narrative of him being abusive, him being not fit to have a family because the way he acts. But based on everything that happened in the past, Kenny gets overprotective. Like you said, he gets overprotective because he doesn't want his family to die. Every single time somebody dies, Kenny gets more protective. It makes him seem as unhinged, but he just wants to be more protective so he don't lose somebody else. That's it.
Has left. Take his treatment of Arvo in episode 5.
Yeah.
Kenny's anger stems
That nigga.
from believing Arvo led Clementine and AJ into a dangerous situation. A frozen lake where Clementine nearly died and others didn't make it out. Yes, Kenny was wrong, but his anger wasn't senseless or sadistic. It was born from the fear of losing yet another loved one in front of him. He's not just
Yeah, I think the way that Kenny treated Arvo, I think that it was wrong. Like I think that he did a lot of extra. I'm not gonna lie. But it makes sense. People who say that Kenny, did too much, he was crashing out, you have to look at the reality situation. The person that we have trapped, yes, he's a little kid, yes, his family died as well, but his actions caused most of my group to die. His action caused 2 people to die. If you made that choice, I made a choice. 1 person to die, and Luke's dying either way. So Luke dies either way. Clementine almost dies based on the choices you choose, or Bonnie dies. Then Rebecca, it wasn't his fault that Rebecca died, but Rebecca dies on top of that, and also Luke gets shot. A lot of things happen because of that little boy. So because of that, he's gonna direct his anger because he's not protecting the people that he loved. That just makes sense. Now, I do think he did a lot. Yes, he did do a lot. I'm not saying he didn't do a lot. He did, but I understand why.
angry at Arvo, he's angry at himself for trusting Arvo and risking Clementine's life. This mindset is reflected earlier in episode 5, when Kenny expresses regret over how he treated Clementine after Sarita's death, also acknowledging his own mistakes while raising Duck. When Kenny tries to kill Jane, it's not because he's insane or wants control over Clementine. He believes Jane purposefully killed or abandoned AJ. For Kenny, this is a personal betrayal. It replays his worst nightmare. When he says he wouldn't have attacked Jane if she just told him AJ was safe, I believe him. We see the same pattern with Arvo. Kenny stops when the truth comes out. Kenny's problem isn't that he's abusive or insane. It's that he is deeply insecure about his ability to protect those he loves. His actions reflect reflect a version of Lee who has experienced profound loss. Lee never had to watch the person he loved die in front of him, or shoot them to end their suffering. Kenny has lived through that pain again and again, blaming himself every time it happens, and every time it nearly happens. Kenny is still a reflection of Lee, but one who has experienced far more devastating loss. If Lee had lost Clementine while caring for Duck, I believe his ruthlessness would have escalated just as Kenny's did. It's also worth noting that Kenny is the only
100%. You can tell like how Lee goes, like the way he acts trying to find Clementine. So him trying to act like that fighting Clementine, imagine if she would have died. That now would have been a good look.
only one in the group who genuinely cares about getting basic supplies for AJ. He constantly stresses over securing food, water and safety, while the rest of the group seems less concerned. Naturally, they resent Kenny for always being the one to worry and make decisions. Despite the immense pressure on him, Kenny's sole focus is AJ's survival, something that stands in stark contrast to characters like Mike and Bonnie who don't seem to care and instead defend Arvo and leave with him, likely because it's the easier choice. Because
See, I didn't know that Bonnie left because I killed Bonnie. So I didn't know that Bonnie I didn't know Bonnie even left with Mike because I killed Bonnie. But I still can't believe that Mike did that. That was crazy, man. I remember when Mike did that, I was like, wow, that's crazy.
AJ is a baby, and a baby is a burden to everyone except Kenny.
Let me see him. I thought we lost you, buddy.
But does any of this mean Kenny is innocent? Absolutely not. Kenny is deeply damaged, he's reckless and often unreliable. But his intentions are clear. He loves Clementine and AJ, and he'll do whatever it takes to protect them. At the gates of Wellington, Kenny admits his flaws. He knows he can be reckless and dangerous. But he also knows he loves Clementine and AJ so much that he's willing to risk everything for them, even if it means making the wrong choice. Telling Clementine to stay at Wellington isn't just about securing their future, it's Kenny's way of finding peace. It's the culmination of his arc. He moves from feeling like a failure to fulfilling his role as protector. And just as a side note, if Kenny was an abuser, he wouldn't want to let Clementine and AJ go, but he does, willingly and gladly. For me, the Wellington ending is the best conclusion to Kenny's story. Clementine and
I think so as well. I think Wellington's the best option because as he said about Kenny, Kenny knows that he's not fit. He knows, and he says it multiple times. He says, "Y'all take them two. I'll go myself," because he knows that he is reckless and he cannot care for two people like that. And if Clementine and AJ go with him, he will do everything for them, and that can work out, yes. But if that comes to an option and Kenny dies, that's Clementine left with a little boy. Now, either way, it doesn't matter because Wellington is rated and Clementine has to care for AJ either way. But looking at the reality situation before that even happened, like, bro, come on, man. Like, I think Wellington was the best option as well.
AJ are safe, and Kenny finds closure. He evolves from a man consumed by guilt and failure to one who ensures the safety of those he loves.
Okay, we'll stay.
Good.
We'll stay.
This is the right decision. Okay. Right. When he's grown, you tell him about his mommy and his daddy and all the people who tried to keep him safe. You tell him, okay? He deserves to know.
And let's be honest, Kenny not flying through a windshield in Season 3 is a pretty great bonus.
Yeah, I seen what happens if you pick the other option. That nigga Kenny dies while trying to drive a car.
Seriously, TellTale, that was a poor choice. But I know some of you believe Jane is the better choice for Clementine, so let me set aside my bias and argue her side. From Jane's perspective, Kenny is a ticking time bomb. Any loss or perceived betrayal sends him spiraling into violent outbursts. His impulsiveness and lack of emotional control make him dangerous in Jane's eyes. She sees him as someone consumed by revenge, willing to hurt others to satisfy his anger. This volatility makes Kenny an unreliable protector, and his dream of reaching Wellington could be yet another unrealistic obsession, similar to his fixation on boats in Season 1. Jane, in contrast, is a pragmatic survivor who values self-preservation over sentimentality. Her decision to abandon her sister when she became a liability reflects her harsh worldview. Jane also advocates leaving Sarah behind, illustrating her belief that carrying dead weight risks survival. Unlike Kenny, who clings to protecting others regardless of the cost, Jane avoids attachments, which allows her to act swiftly and minimize risks. When Kenny assumes she killed the baby, it pushes him to attack her. In the eyes of Jane fans, this validates her claim that he is too dangerous to trust in critical moments. Ultimately though, the choice comes down to your personal perspective. If you believe in punishing betrayal and protecting innocent life at all costs, Kenny may resonate with your values. If Season 2 taught you that people are often liabilities and fewer companions means fewer problems, Jane's philosophy may make more sense to you. Alternatively, choosing to have Clementine and AJ go it alone might feel like a middle ground. If you shot Kenny and discovered Jane's deception, both may seem unfit to stay with Clem, leaving independence as the safest path. Reintroducing my bias now, I still believe Wellington is the best ending. I disagree with Jane's philosophy of abandoning the vulnerable for freedom, and I'm not a fan of the fact that she up and leaves so often. I also don't believe an 11-year-old girl and a baby should be left unsupervised. For me, this makes...
That's why I don't agree with Jane. Because the thing about Jane is that I understand to a certain extent, like, you know, leaving vulnerability. Because, like, bro, if somebody's like for example, Season 1 with Ben, a lot of people killed Ben in Season 1 because of the stuff that he did and how bad he was to the group. Somebody like that, okay. But an 11-year-old girl and a baby, Jane has a track record of leaving, of just up and leaving, going wherever she want to go, do whatever she want to do, and that's not good. Because one day, what if there's a situation like Sarah, where Clementine and AJ are stuck, and Jane can help them out at the risk of her life, and she decides not to do it, and she decides just to go off on her own. That is horrible. That is a horrible outlook for somebody to stay with. That's why I think Kenny is the best option.
Kenny the best choice. Despite his flaws, Kenny genuinely cares about Clementine and will sacrifice everything to protect her and AJ. Whether or not you find Kenny reliable, he fulfills his role as protector by getting Clementine and AJ to Wellington, where he urges them to stay, completing his arc.
Cheated.
I believe The Walking Dead Season 2 is deeply misunderstood. While I agree the writing can be inconsistent, like Rebecca suddenly switching from hating Clementine to being her best buddy once the writers realised AJ could drive the story, the game's true strength lies in its themes and character development. For a game centred on choices, some argue the narratives make Clementine feel ignored, which frustrates players. But for me, Season 2 isn't about the illusion of choice. It's about discovering what kind of person.
A lot of people argue that the way that they have Season 2 Smile Little Girl, yeah, that's the argument, that people don't like that. I have a counter argument. I don't like how a lot of decisions are hinged on Clementine. I don't like how a lot of things Clementine has to do as an 11-year-old girl. I think that her choices not making that much of an effect shows how realistic that is. That is a realistic thing. I understand that it's a video game, people like action, people like choices, but that is a realistic option. If you are a 12, 11-year-old boy First of all, people won't even pay you no mind. You're gonna get ignored. You're not gonna be asked for input. That makes sense because guess what? You're not really that high up on the hierarchy of adults. You are a teenager. You are a young adolescent girl, a young adolescent boy. So why would they value your opinion? Why would they value how you think or how you feel? Like that's just how it works out. So season 2 was more realistic than any other, not more realistic than any other season, but a realistic season. That makes sense. But the thing that I don't like is how people in the season try to make it seem like your choices was always wrong. Like, for example, when I stayed with Kenny, everybody was on my case about that. I'm like, bro, I can stay with Kenny if I want to stay with Kenny. If I want to watch Kenny beat up Carver, I'm going to watch it. And that's what I'm saying. When I have to steal the walkie-talkies, I understand I was the only person who could do it, but I gotta do it. Like, stuff like that, bro. Like, but I don't mind season 2. I don't think season 2 is horrible. I don't think it's trash. I really don't think so. I think season 1, I think the Walking Dead TellTale series is really good. I think it's good, but I just think the way that season 1 was, people expect season 2 to try to triumph that or to be the similar way. But I mean, if you're playing as Clementine, a more realistic option was this season.
Clementine becomes. The decisions you make, who you trust, who you side with, and which plans you support shape Clementine's personality and moral compass. At the time of release, these choices felt practical and grounded. However, A New Frontier made much of Season 2 redundant. Clementine was reduced to a side character, and the handling of Kenny and Jane's arcs was appalling. Season 1 was about Lee teaching Clementine how to survive while holding on to her humanity. Season 2 was about Clementine stepping into her own, navigating flawed characters and deciding who to trust based on her values rather than emotions. Season 3 should have been the payoff, showing a Clementine shaped by Lee's lessons and the relationships she built in Season 2. If Kenny symbolized family, Jane survival, and Luke morality, then your choices on who to side with should have fundamentally influenced the Clementine we saw in A New Frontier. TellTale seemed to understand this, but they never followed through. The game didn't track or acknowledge who you agreed with. Season 2 was meant to be the foundation for an amazing threequel, but instead, it was undercut by its successor. Ultimately, Season 2's biggest flaw isn't within itself, it's that Season 3 failed to give it the resolution it deserved. If A New Frontier had lived up to the character development, letting Kenny's Clem stay with him, Jane's Clem embrace independence, and Solo Clem become a hardened survivor, Season 2 would likely be far better appreciated.
And I agree. I'm playing Season 3 right now, and Season 3 I think is good. I don't mind it, but I hate the fact that Clementine is like a side character. And it's like a lot of people's argument is that the Clementine they have in Season 3 was not the Clementine that they built. And that is true. I just think that having a random character like Javier like that, it's just, I don't know, it just messes up how the foundation works in the game. I think that Clementine would have been a perfect person, or if you wanted someone like that, you should have kept Lee alive. But I think that Clementine was the perfect person to just keep the season going, to keep it going on, to have her Season 3 and Season 4 based on what you pick. If you pick Kenny and you stay in Wellington, have a script about how she stay in Wellington. If you pick with Kenny, you stay with Kenny, stay something with Kenny. Pick with Kenny, stay with Jane, something to do with Jane. Or if you went independent, see what we did independence. I don't like the fact that every single choice you made doesn't matter. Everybody just dies. If you stay with Kenny, Kenny dies. If you stay with Jane, Jane kills herself. If you stay in Wellington, Wellington blows up and gets like. I don't like Season 3. I feel like Season 3 messed up a lot of stuff that happened. But Season 4 recovered. I want to play Season 4 again. I want to play Season 4. I haven't played it, but I watched it. And I think Season 4 is straight, but I think Season 3 is a problem that people don't talk about.
Today. It was a strong build-up for a conclusion we never got. This, ultimately, is what I see people miss when they critique Season 2. They misunderstand that this season was never meant to be about strong choices where action is key. It was meant to find out what Clementine you're raising by circling you with characters who hold deeply divisive worldviews. Season 2 is always judged in retrospect due to how long the franchise has remained relevant, and I'm not saying those critiques aren't valid. They are. However, if you play the game as if New Frontier never happened and the franchise ended there, you start to understand what the mindset was. To reiterate, it's not about your choices like with Lee, it's about your opinions and who Clementine becomes via them. I personally still love Season 2. It's not perfect, it was never meant to be. However, when I played it all those years ago, it had a far better reception than it does now. And in my opinion, the reason for that is because A New Frontier was so disappointing and handled our choices terribly. And that is the true purpose and meaning of Season 2.
Good video, great video. Does he have a video talk about Season 3? He does. Wow. It just came out. Season New Frontier. New Frontier. Terrible season. Great game. Huh.
You my little boo thing, so I'll give a hoot what you do, say girl.
I'm adding it to the reactions. We gotta watch that one. Next time.